One thing that we have noticed here in all of our tracking at Gallup of Americans' attitudes towards their government is more negative opinions. Congress approval last year reached its lowest yearly average in our history. We had the lowest single monthly average that we've ever had on Congress approval. Other attitudes towards government in general have been quite low. So in general, Americans are down on the way their government's performing here in Washington. And now we have another manifestation of this displeasure, and that is an increasing number of Americans who tell us that they are nonpartisan. In other words, when we say, are you Republican, Democrat, or independent, more than at any time in our tracking history, Americans say we're independent. In other words, Americans don't want anything to do with either the Republican or the Democratic Party. Now look at the trend here. We have up to 42% of Americans this past year who said they were independent as opposed to being Republican or Democratic. Of those who remain, there is a slight tilt towards being Democrat versus Republican. In fact, the percent who now identify as Republicans is also at its lowest point in our history of asking this on the telephone. So Republicans appear to be suffering more than Democrats, but the bigger picture is an increase in the percent of Americans who say they are independent. Look at just this past year. We looked at it by the 4 quarters of the year. My colleague Jeff Jones has analyzed this in some depth here at Gallup.com, but look at the trend within this year. We clearly see in quarter 3 and quarter 4 the real jump in the percent of Americans who are independent. And of course, that was coincident with the shutdown of government in September, the last month of the 3rd quarter, and then of course the continued problems with other aspects of government on into the 4th quarter. So clearly, even in this last year, we've seen this increase in the percent of Americans who say, hey, I'm independent, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. Now, this is an election year, 2014, midterm election year, and we would generally expect to see somewhat more of a pullback to allegiance with one of the two parties, but it looks like right now, if one is running for office this year, one might be better advised to get away from either of the major political parties right now and cast kind of an independent path, because Americans at this point simply don't like the idea, in general, at least they're tilting that way, of identifying with either of the two major parties. That's an update for you on Party ID. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, Gallup Editor-in-Chief.